Welcome to the Spa Girls podcast, the self-publishing podcast for authors. You're in the right place for the best writing, marketing, and publishing advice, plus interviews with industry experts and best-selling authors. I'm Cheryl Phipps.
I'm Shah Barrett.
I'm Wendy Vella.
And I'm Trudy J. And this week we have the delightful Cathy Yardley with us.
Yay! Hey, Cathy.
So happy to see you again.
Yes.
Thank you. It's so great to see you guys again, too.
We had Cathy down in New Zealand for our Romance Writers of New Zealand conference, and she was so amazing that we wanted to get her on to the podcast to chat with her even more about all the good stuff. So I'm going to quickly read your bio, and then we're just going to get right into all the questions.
Brilliant.
So, Cathy Yardley is an award-winning hybrid author of romance, chick lit, and urban fantasy who has sold over 1.2 million copies of her books for publishers like St. Martin's, Avon, and Harlequin. She writes fun, geeky, and diverse characters who believe that underdogs can make good and that sometimes being a little wrong is just right. I like the sound of that.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah.
She likes writing about quirky, crazy adventures because she's had plenty of her own. She had her own army in the Society of Creative Anachronism. She spent a New Year's on a 3-day solitary vision quest in the Mojave Desert, and she had VIP access to the Viper Room in Los Angeles. These all sound like really good stories.
Yes.
Now she spends her time writing in the wilds of East Seattle, trying to prevent her son from learning the truth of any of the said adventures and riding herd on her 2 dogs and 1 husband. Awesome.
Brilliant bio.
It's very good.
Very good.
So, Cathy, just to start, tell us how you got into writing and publishing. Like, what's your origin story?
My origin story. Funny enough, I come from a family of engineers and accountants. And the idea of being a writer was like, oh, that's something you do like when you retire, as a hobby. So I really didn't have any intention of being a writer initially. I actually was planning on getting a shadow job, which is being a publicist for writers. I got a mass communications degree. I interned at a publisher, like a nonfiction publisher. But in college, and the other thing was I had worked in libraries all throughout my high school and college experience. And my best friend in college had a literal built-in bookshelf closet full of romances. And my mom had always said, my Asian immigrant mom was like, those will rip your brain. So of course I like was drawn to them like a magnet.
Yeah.
So I remember crashing at my friend's place and reading Julie Garwood's The Lion's Lady until like 2 in the morning. And I was like, I must get more of this.
Yeah,
So,
great book.
so after I graduated, I joined the Los Angeles Romance Authors with an eye toward being, again, a publicist for romance because I love the genre. Um, and it was one of those things where you kind of leave the room and then suddenly you're volunteered for the chapter,
Yep.
Suddenly I was president of the chapter.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I was still writing a little, but I was like, this isn't serious. Like you write, but you're kind of lying to yourself.
Yeah.
And we were short entries. So I put an entry in for, first 3 chapters or whatever. And it placed. And I was just like, well, that's odd. So I finished a manuscript and submitted it, and it was rejected, as well it should be. But then the next one, it was one of those luck things where I submitted it, an author had dropped out of a planned trilogy for Harlequin, and they were like, "We just need this immediately. Can you finish and do the edits?" I was like, "Of course," because this you have to understand. I've been writing for 25 years. So this predates ebooks, really. I mean, there were like a couple of like very clunky, like the equivalent of those phones that were like a brick,
People carried around.
We all remember those. We all love it.
Yeah.
So there were no Kindles. There was, Amazon was barely a thing. So that's how I got started. I sort of fell into it. I fought my fate for a bit. And then, as they say, if you want to see if you're a writer, try being anything else.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the luck is maybe you got the right person when the book was submitted, because if the book wasn't good enough, it wouldn't have been accepted. So
Yeah.
you did
Nice work.
that.
I will say, I mean, obviously I loved writing. I just didn't expect it to look the way it did. I just didn't expect to push it. I was just like, okay, I'm not going to make a career out of this necessarily. I'm going to be a publicist, but I still like writing. And then when it was published, I was like, okay, maybe you need to stop kidding yourself. And just embrace what you are.
Yeah.
So.
And it went on from there. So was that with Harlequin, did you say? Was that your first book? Yeah. Okay. And moved on. So at conference, you had this awesome talk about writing your truth and kind of being true to yourself. And you started it with a story about going to, I think it was at RWA, and going to the Harlequin event. Can you just talk about that, and then sort of we'll move into writing your truth?
Sure. So I had sold that book, the one I was just talking about, but it hadn't come out yet. And before that, so it was going to come out in 2000. This was 1999. And there was the big RWA conference, which I had never been to before. And I was like, I'm a professional now. I should go do this. So I went, and the publishers at that time, those very days of wine and roses, they would have these huge parties, and Harlequins was pretty much the biggest. And I didn't really know anybody. I'd gone with a few chapter mates, but wasn't brazen enough to drag some non-Harlequin people there. So I didn't know anybody. I feel like, country mouse. And I was like really scared because it's packed, and I see Nora Roberts dancing on the dance floor, and it's like very intimidating prom. It was just like, and this woman comes up to me. She goes, "Are you Cathy Yardley?" And again, my book has not come out yet. So this was very startling. I'm like, well, yes, this is very exciting.
Yes, I am.
Yeah. So I said, so how did you know? And she gives me this sad little smile and says, because we're the only two Asians here.
Oh, wow.
And that was my first taste of, I knew it wasn't that anything that anyone would notice other than the two of us. It was almost just like, yep. And this is the reality. This is publishing. So, and that's what I learned. I did not write Asian characters. My first book did not have Asian characters. I would start sneaking them in, like in the third book. And even then, my third book was a chick lit. And at that point, it was when chick lit was kind of coming up. You usually had three main characters, and the third main character was Asian.
Best friend.
But basically, it was very much this, not exactly subversive, but I kind of knew what would sell and what wouldn't.
Yeah.
And so at what point did you kind of go, so you were writing mainly white characters, and then do you still do that? I feel like you've branched out?
Well, right now it's a very strange time. Publishing has always been the Wild West, in my experience. With the rise of indies, you can write whatever you want, which is glorious, because you never have to think, oh, that trend is over, because theoretically, and actually realistically, there's always an audience that's still there. It's not like, oh, you know what? This year I don't like paranormals anymore. It's like, I don't like that every paranormal sounds the same. They get tired of, it's like, I love mashed potatoes, but I can't eat mashed potatoes every day for a year. I need a break from mashed potatoes. Eventually I will come back around to mashed potatoes. That said, I can have cheese 365. I mean, my doctor would kill me. There are some people who are cheese people. Your genre will be there every day.
Yeah.
As long as you have indie, you can cater to that audience.
Mm.
So I still write white characters, like I'll write interracial relationships and stuff. I personally am biracial. I'm Vietnamese and Irish American, and among a mix of other things. So, and also, it's, for lack of a better term, it's easy to write white culture because that's the dominant culture. You have been watching it your entire life, no matter what race you are. So I don't think I will, like stop myself from writing white characters. But the fact that I can write more characters that are closer to my experience, especially since biracial, especially, is a weird experience because you don't quite fit anywhere. I mean, Asians, I went to Berkeley for college. And at the time, I don't know what it's like now, but Asians were the majority. I had never seen so much black hair in my life. And I was from Southern California, where like blondes. So it was just very like unsettling. But I did have an Asian man come up to me in the library, incensed because I was a security guard. And he was just like, "What are you?" Like he had a right to know. So I said, "I'm Irish." And was like, make a move, buddy. Because I was security. And also I was irritated. And also I hit a point where I have like really just like the guardrail comes off. It's just like, okay, we're gonna roll.
Yeah. I think we all at that point.
Yeah. Hold my earrings.
Yeah. That's the one. Grab my bag, I'm off.
Yeah. Okay, so that's cool. That's not cool, but he did. But so there's that underlying theme, that runs, well, obviously through your life. Do you have that? Because we talked a little bit about the fact that you're neurodivergent and that you kind of incorporating that kind of stuff into your books as well. So that's part of your unique truth, I guess, too. So how does that work in your books?
It's been that, okay. I discovered that I was ADHD later in life also. I was in my 40s when my son was diagnosed, because they were like, well, you might want to get him checked because we're seeing X, Y, and Z. I was like, well, that doesn't mean he has ADHD. I do all of the
light bulb moment.
See, just that light bulb moment.
Yeah.
So I got checked and was like, aha, I've been ADHD all my life. And this makes so much sense. Because a lot of people are like, but, you got good grades, you got to a good college, you are all these things. But when I look back, especially when I look back at my publishing career, where it was like, why can't you be consistent? Why are you constantly changing? Why, and for me, why do you need systems in order to do, like plotting and, marketing and stuff like that? But at the same time, they have to be very specific systems, because there are some systems like every year around January or December, I'll look at the new planners that are coming out. They have like all the color coding and stickers and stuff. And I'm like, God, it's like looking at a spa where it's just like, I want to be that. I want to be that organized and relaxed. That looks glorious. But it's like, I'm going to spend all this money, and by February, it will like be a flaming heap somewhere amidst like a just dumpster fire of chaos. So it is very much like, okay, I know what I am, and I know, actually, that's why I publish traditional a lot now too. Because a lot of people, and I love and respect indie, and I genuinely hope to get back to it too. But when I'm super stressed, it helps to have someone else kind of with the deadlines orchestrating things. They orchestrate, like I write for Motley. They have 4 rounds of edits that I don't have to think about. I just get the edit and they say, hey, 2 weeks. They're very understanding. And then they're like, okay, this is the marketing. And I'll go, okay. Like I
Yeah.
look over at, this is the, marketing copy. It's not that they have, and I'm very blessed to be with the house I'm with. There are drawbacks, don't get me wrong, but um, but I have been lucky,
Yeah.
and that's why. If I wasn't ADHD, I would probably be more indie, and that's just me too.
Yeah.
Neurodivergent people are not monolithic.
Mm.
It's different. There's some who like I can't work with a traditional for exactly that reason.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you talked at conference, you talked about finding your unique voice and that it was a game changer for you, that you kind of suddenly realized that you needed to write from who you are rather than maybe from expectations or what you thought you had to write, if I'm getting that right. Can you just talk about that and how you found your voice and how it changed things for you?
I believe I found my voice essentially during the pandemic, strangely enough. I had been closing out a trilogy with my current publisher. I had sold the first two books on a contract, then I had two books. The third book was the last in that trilogy, and then this one, the very last one, was not exactly a blind. They knew what it was about ish. And the trilogy was doing okay, but nothing like, not blowing the doors open. So I was just like, with numbers like these, I'm probably not going to stay, where I am. So what the hell? Let's floor it. Because I have wanted to write this book that was very different, that had older protagonists, and she's 48, he's 50, that had biracial representation, which I was already doing, but this kind of leaned into it. That had queer representation, that had kind of the anti-hallmark. It was so many things that should not have, and grumpy sunshine, but she's the grump, to a like feral amount. There were so many things that shouldn't have worked. And I genuinely turned it in with a note saying, like, I'm fairly certain you're going to have me rewrite all of this, which is fine, but but I want to give it a shot. And my editor got it, which was the other reason I've been blessed here. She was just like, yep, this is it. Marketing, less thrilled initially. It's like, I don't know about this.
What is this?
Yeah. How do we market this?
Until The Golden Bachelor was announced. And then they were like, wait, they believe that older people can fall in love. All right, we'll give it a shot. And then it's like, aha, there is a market. And then the book itself was like, yes, there is.
So the book did really well, is the end of that?
It has done better than any book I've ever written.
Yeah.
And I still get comments, I still get sales. It's still, it was one of the New York Times 10 best romances of the year. It was one of Book Riot's 10 best books of the year. It won the American Library Association's Romance of the Year.
So okay,
it was the most
just okay, just casually.
Okay, now we have to know the name of the book, please.
the book is Role Playing.
Yeah. I literally just brought that this morning, actually, as I was going through doing my research
God,
about
I hope
you.
it lives up to the hype at this point.
Yeah, I know, right? We're expecting great things.
So with role playing, so is there has it changed since then? Like, have you books that when did it come out, actually? When was
It came out June 2023.
Okay, so last year. So
relatively recently.
Yeah. So books, what books have you put out since then, and have you leaned into the same kind of things?
Yeah, this book this summer, like end of July 2024, I released Do Me a Favor, which also has older protagonists and a biracial heroine, which is also doing well. Yay.
Yay.
But she is a widow, and who has recently moved to a small island in the Pacific Northwest, and he is a handyman who lives at the hobby farm next door in a multi-generational family. His parents live in a small cabin on the property. He and his adult daughter and his adult son live there. He had them when he was quite young. So she's learning to love kind of again and like not be guarded. He's learning to put himself first. Because I think a lot of people at that age, especially when like either you're empty nester or not, it is you're so used to the role of being a parent that it is very hard to start seeing yourself as yourself. So they're learning about each other, and yeah, it's very much a sweet with a bit of sting story.
That's really cool because there are definitely different, exactly what you've just said, different issues that you have when you're older than that, like you've had 20-year-old protagonists. I mean, they're not going to be worrying about the kids or whatever unless they've had kids young. But like, there's really different things that you're worrying about, and you're able to kind of bring that in and appeal to a different audience. They did that with the paranormal women's fiction. The group of authors decided they were going to do paranormal books, but for older protagonists. So I guess you're leading the way with. Are they rom-coms? Is that what they are?
Are rom-coms, although I would categorize them as they're not like the kind of hijinks-filled premise rom-coms per se, like like a Megan Quinn or a Pippa Grant. And that is not to knock them because love them. But these are, because of the issues that I'm dealing with in the books, they are more grounded. So they're fun, and there are some funny and absolutely, bonkers sort of situations that they do get into. But they also, I would hate to mislead a reader in thinking, like, this is going to be a romp, and then it's like, yeah. Like,
That's good. I like it more when it's more to it, right? There's more angst, I want to say, but So how did you get to the point where you felt like you had your unique voice? Like, if someone's sitting here listening to this going, oh, but what's my unique voice? I don't know what that is even, or how do I find it? What did you do, if anything?
Well, I wrote for 25 years. That's something.
Exactly. She did her apprenticeship. Yeah.
I think that it's find the writing that you want to do when you're not thinking about the market, which sounds so precious, and so like, oh, that's easy to say. But it is a leap of faith. I genuinely believe that, especially with. It's always been a crowded market. Indie only made it more crowded. AI is going to make it a nightmare. And the analogy I always use at this point is, do you guys remember when reality shows came up?
And I'm afraid that New Zealand has to answer for that, because we arguably have the original one, which was a band formed. It was sort of the precursor to like The Voice, anything that involved music. It was here. It's called Pop Stars. So I'm sorry.
Sorry about
that. Sorry about that. World.
Yeah. And boy, did they run with it.
Yeah, right?
Just quietly.
Yeah.
But I would say so late 90s, early 2000s, reality shows became so big and so just pervasive that magazines and news sources were saying that it was the death of scripted television. Because up to that point, it had only been like, some tired sitcoms and police procedurals. And it was very like, it was where actors went to, pasture. It was just like sad. Yeah. Everyone saw TV as a step down. Your goal was always to make it up to movies.
You'd never see a big movie star in a TV series, because that was like, dude.
Exactly. But instead, it created the renaissance of television, because you got The Sopranos, and Breaking Bad and Orange is the New Black and Game
Mhm.
of Thrones. Instead, writers basically leveled up their game.
Mhm. Yeah.
They increased production values. But the important part was the writing itself took risks and was so much richer. And I think that we can do the same thing. But it's going to require not just looking at the market and seeing how can I, match and how can I take advantage. The reason new trends start is, in my opinion, someone changes the game with something that is a risk. And that's what you want. If you want to get ahead of it, you need to be that game changer.
Yeah.
And that takes a lot of confidence and also a lot of faith in yourself.
Mm-hmm. So perhaps it's not the thing that you do when you're starting out with your very first book.
You'd be surprised.
Really?
Simply because, and it's like, I still have doubt. Every book. My poor agent, my poor husband have to hear it. But it's not working without doubt, in my opinion. And this is going to sound terrible, but have you ever heard the advice, have the confidence of a mediocre white man?
Yeah.
It's that. It's basically like there are a million people who have done what you're afraid of, with no nothing backing them attempting it. So if you're afraid that you're not good enough, make sure that you're not hobbling yourself. It really is better to try for it than think, okay, I will limit myself until I feel like, I'm ready. Because it's like parenting, you're never ready.
Yeah.
You just
it's true.
It's like women in job interviews. We tend to undersell ourselves all the time and only go for the jobs that we think we can do everything,
I don't think that's just women either, Shah, to be honest. I think I know a lot of men who, I think it's just in a bit of a thing we've always done more than men, and especially in our writing.
We're talking in generalizations, of course, but I think in general, I don't know. I don't, anyway. But it's the same, so what you're saying is embrace the fear.
Yeah. And do it anyway.
The best way to do that also is to have a good, solid group or community of writers around you, especially a tight group. Whether ideally they should be writers, whether they're not currently writing, it's like that's not the point. If they're writers, they'll understand. It's good to have just a group of friends, but a group of writers will understand when you're like, oh my God, I'm stuck and I'm tearing my hair out. And they could be like, yep, like, here, have a cookie, whatever. They will believe in you when you don't. And that makes a huge difference. And I think a lot of writers write in isolation because that's the job, and don't realize just how crucial that community is.
Yeah, I agree. We talk about that a lot, actually. Having a community around you, even if it's one person that you really, really trust and respect. But it's vital because you need someone to bounce ideas off and to, those bad days.
And lift you up,
Yeah, for sure, 100%.
So if you've got the community around you and you're trying to figure out how to be uniquely you, should you be looking to yourself? Like, or how do we find the things that, I don't know. I don't know what I'm trying to ask, but I'm hoping you get it.
I would call it and I got this from an old job, but where the mission meets the margin. Because it's like, you don't want to be so like, I want to write, a love story between a gardener and a snail. I mean, if you do, hats off.
Go for it. Who's to say, right? Yeah.
But that is going to be a harder sell. That said, the opposite end of that spectrum is, okay, dark romantasy mafia is selling like gangbusters, so I'm going to write about a fae hitman. I've never read that, but I'll try. And it's just like, okay. Somewhere between what is popular. And by popular, I don't mean trendy. I just mean like an established like genre and what you love. And what you kind of daydream about, what kind of story you would always like to write. Somewhere in that Venn diagram is that center, and that's where your unique voice lies.
Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah.
The other thing I remember from conference that you talked about, you told this great story about your mum and being she's Vietnamese and what she does with the Tupperware and how like some of this story. So I just want you to tell that story and just kind of because I feel like that's a big part of this too, like taking stuff that means something to you and that you understand, but how it can, you go.
Also, R.I.P. Tupperware, just saying.
Okay. Not any, but I would say a majority of Vietnamese kids will know this. In our house, the dishwasher was not for washing dishes. The dishwasher was like, plastic food storage containers. Like that's where you put containers. It was just in the dishwasher. I'm not sure why this is, but it definitely is like yep. As soon as it's like no, we don't use the dishwasher for washing dishes. It is an Easter egg. It is like a hat tip to that population. I was thinking actually I had read, don't advise this, but I had read a review of actually Do Me a Favor because she goes back to her family's house and is talking about her mother's house and how the dishwasher is just for this. And she was like, my house, my mom's dishwasher only holds for bake lights. And I'm like, yep, you're Vietnamese, you get it.
Yeah.
But I also write a lot of geeky books and I put in Easter eggs for that too. So the trick is to make the books accessible for people who are outside of these genres to a certain extent. So it's not like impenetrable. I'm not gatekeeping with the unique voice. But the people, I also know that if there's somebody who like, oh my God, I hated role playing because it's got a video game, I'm going to be like, well, good luck. It's like, I don't need you to like, my audience is not everyone. Like one size fits all fits nobody well. But if you do like geeky stuff, or you do like older protagonists, or you do have this kind of Asian-ish background, Asian people, you've lived with them, you are them, then you will understand these points of view and it will resonate that much stronger.
Yeah. And you talked about it as well, which is what I remember about it, because obviously I'm not Vietnamese, but you were saying how you put in these little Easter eggs and it connects you, like you don't have to be from that background. You don't have to be,
Specificity leads to universality, I think is the quote. The fact it's rather than sort of flattening an experience to try to make it understandable and appealable to everyone is when I described, like it's such a small detail of like not using the dishwasher, using it only for storage. But it speaks to, especially when she's calling it out, like, oh God, Mom, you have a dishwasher. Why are you doing this? It will speak to people not from that culture who are like, yeah, my mom from a different culture does this. That also makes me nuts. Where it's like, why does she cut the ends off, like both ends off a ham before cooking it? Where it's just like there's no sense to that, but she does it.
Yeah. So it's kind of like specific, but also universal because we all have that.
In all our minds now, we're going back as to what that one thing, right?
What's our mother done? And that's actually I think a really cool tip for when you're writing a scene to kind of think about what are these specific things to my experience that might that other people might understand or like because they've been through the same thing or because they have something similar on a slightly different level. I think that's awesome.
Very cool.
So are there any other tips towards how to find your unique voice or write more uniquely you that you want to share before we move on to the next thing?
Just figuring out again what you genuinely like. I think it is too easy to get swamped, especially if you're listening or if you're reading K-lytics, if you're looking at, like what's the next big thing, make sure that you're checking in with yourself constantly. Like, is this something I like? Is this something that's true to me? So.
Yeah.
Makes total sense, because it is easy to get caught into that loop of, okay, well, XYZ is selling, but it's not something you've ever watched or you've ever, like, even vaguely sort of explored on the outskirts. And it's,
Yeah. And that it's okay not to be part of the mainstream, I think.
I think that's it. Yeah.
Because actually, and this is something you learn in marketing, it's like not trying to appeal to everyone appeals to no one. And actually, it is better to niche down and have your one specific place. And it is the book that Cathy wrote that was the most niche, probably, out of all, and it's done the best, And I think that's not a like if you had a marketing person on, they wouldn't be surprised by that, because that is a very common marketing recommendation. That's what I'm trying to say. So the next thing I want to talk about is a little bit on how you rock your plot. And I know that you said that you've got very specific systems because of the ADHD that you use to kind of create something awesome. So I'm hoping that you'll be able to tell us all so that I can use them.
Wow. Okay.
No pressure.
Don't feel any pressure at all about that.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
And say, I don't know that I can get it down to an hour, but distilling it to like 5 minutes may be a push.
Okay, you got 10 then, 10 minutes.
The system I came up with was because I had to write under deadline. That's the other kind of blessing and curse of trad, where it's like and I mean, I know indies have the same thing, because you're contracting with an editor and then suddenly your editor will not be there unless you get your book in. So it was this time crunch. So I had to reverse engineer, like, okay, with a 40-hour-week job and whatever, how do I do this? And I'd read like 8 bajillion reference books, and I was trying to like distill them down. So I came up with my system, which is basically using a kind of version of Deb Dixon's GMC, which I recommend to everyone. Yeah. And like in Romancelandia, everybody knows GMC, I'm fairly certain.
Just to explain, goal, motivation, conflict. Is that right?
Yeah. Yes. Goal, motivation, conflict. So, and there is an external version and an internal version. The external version is what your book description is, basically. The internal version is the engine that drives your characters to do what they do. You need both parts. And then I have a set of plot points based on 3-act structure. They're my own kind of odd 8 selected, but it basically walks you through the character arc. And the first question you ask is, how do you want these characters to be different at the end of the book than they are at the beginning? Because and that is like, it seems so simple, but it is like the right hook that comes at all my clients, because they're usually like, and I'll just be like, well, let's go back to basics. How do you want them to be different? And they're like, oh, yeah. And then each point has a purpose, which helps illustrate it starts off with, okay, this is what I want to do externally. I just don't know how to do it. Midpoint, okay, this is what I want to do and I know how to do it, but it's super hard. And then, the third plot point we won't talk about. But then you have this hopeless moment, the dark moment, where all hope seems lost in terms of what they want. And that's external or internal. That's where a lot of people jump the rails, where they're just like, oh, I need something bad to happen. And then there's like a car accident or whatever.
Yeah.
Or a breakup for no reason. And then you resolve it. And that's in 10 minutes. That's basically the system.
No.
Yeah. And that's the thing, right? Like you say, a lot of people, they'll they'll just have this moment that means nothing, that doesn't connect to anything. And it's the same with sex scenes sometimes. Like there'll just be a sex scene because someone told me I had to put a sex scene in, rather than it being something that moves the plot along or is relevant to how that character changes through the book or how this couple gets together. So it's interesting that you're kind of bringing that up there. So how long do you spend a lot of time plotting? Is that a big part of your process?
I'm a just maniacal plotter. I have a full scene outline before I write a word. Granted, I don't stick to it because it's a living document, but I'll change it as things go and realize like, okay, if this changes, it changes other things because it's an interwoven, it's an organic story. If you change something major, of course it's going to affect everything else. But it's never been to the point where, and I call it noodling, and you need to think about or at least I need to think about the story for a significant amount of time before I get to the plotting point. But by the time I get to a plotting stage and I start writing, it is a fairly quick process.
Yeah.
And it's a very clean process. I have very few edits. So that has been a blessing. Also, if you're going to be true to yourself in your writing, also be true to yourself in your process. Like, if it ain't broke, don't necessarily try to fix it.
Yeah. We all feel like that, I think, from time to time.
Yeah. Wendy's always trying to fix her process, and then she goes back to the same one.
And it works.
No, I think it's taken, 10 years later, and I finally admitted that I know how I write. Yeah. It's taken me that long though, right?
But it's the same as like, I totally relate to buying all the planners and the stickers kind of thing. I mean, other things look attractive, there's nothing wrong with that.
No judgment here, Shah.
Like I said, I do work with writers. I mean, that's my day job is being a coach. And despite the fact that I'm a maniacal plotter, I would never tell someone who is a pantser to stop pantsing because that's the path of madness. You have to work within your process. The trick, and I think that the main reason people try to shift from pantsing to plotting or vice versa is because they want their end result to be different, where they're like, if only I was doing this differently, I would be writing more books. I would be making more money. I would be doing, I would be a different, more successful, whatever writer. And it's sort of like, that's not the way to look at it, in my opinion. You need to look at, okay, this is how I write. This is what I like and who I am. How do I make this work for me?
Yeah, that's cool.
Maybe you could move in with me and say that to me every day. That'd be great.
Yeah.
A little recording.
Yeah. She can do. We'll just cut that little bit out of the
recording. And I'll just wake up. Maybe it could be a REM cycle overnight or something,
Yeah. That's awesome. And that falls in with, I know I'm going to do it. I'm going to mention Clifton's strengths, but that's kind of knowing who you are and how you work, and just like ignoring the noise about all these other people telling you that this is what worked for them and you should totally do it their way, and just finding the way that works for you, and finding the kind of the books that work for you and speak to you, and the processes that work for you and speak to you. Yeah. That's
and
awesome.
Being strong enough to stand by them, and that's I think that's something that comes with time as well. But you've got to be strong enough to stick to your guns and think, well, that's me. This is who I am.
Yeah, it's not always that easy.
And the community will help there too.
Yeah, 100%. That is true. And is there, so I've got here set up scenes. So is there a special way that you set up the scenes? Is there something you can talk about to that? I don't know.
Setting up scenes. The way, okay, so this actually, it's a step further from, so if you have goal, motivation, conflict, this is from Jack Bickham's Scene and Structure. Like I said, I've read so many reference books. But he goes a step further, where each scene has a goal, a motivation for that goal that ties into the overall GMC.
Okay.
A conflict for that scene, and then a disaster. And that's the hook. So the analogy I usually use, or at least in the workshop, is let's say you want to borrow money or you need money, as your character needs money. So they go to the bank and the bank says no. So they go to another bank and the bank says no. And they go to a third bank and the bank says no. That's a plateau of conflict because you're just getting no, no, and no. There are 3 different kinds of disasters. There is no, and furthermore, and there is yes, but. So go to the bank, no, that's pretty obvious. Let's say you go to your sibling and you say, hey, bank turned me down, I need money. Your sibling has some resentment that's been bubbling up for years. They decide to take this opportunity to let you have it. So not only do you get a no, but they're like, and now you're out of the family, get out. That's a no. And furthermore, it's like, I have now made the situation considerably worse. And then you say, okay, I have creepy neighbor. I'm going to ask for money, who has always said they'll be there for a hand to help him. So you ask creepy neighbor and say, hey, I need money. Creepy neighbor says, absolutely. If you sleep with me.
Yeah.
That's a yes, but.
Yeah.
It's like,
yeah.
So these are the hooks that, and there's nothing wrong with a simple no. You just want to make sure that you're alternating. And obviously, these are not going to be happening in the end of the 3rd act. By the time you are resolving, these go away because you need to be tying up knots. You're closing plot lines. You're not making things worse. But up to the hopeless moment, you absolutely should be making things worse. Just every scene should have this. And this is the sort of thing that keeps your readers. And they don't have to be like explosions. They don't have to be, like I write contemporary romance, but if you read one of my books, you'll be able to see that, even if it's an emotional, oh no, like I'm now realizing I'm falling in love with this person and I don't want to. That's like a no from an internal goal, where it's like, I wanted to protect myself and be safe. And now I have made myself vulnerable due to whatever just happened.
Yeah.
And it carries you through, and that's what keeps readers up until 2 a.m.
Yeah.
And that's what we all
and
want.
on to your next book too, right?
Yeah.
You keep them hooked. Yeah.
No, that's awesome.
That is the idea.
Thank you for that, explaining what my random notes are. And so let's talk quickly about marketing then now, because that was something else that you have a system that you've created for yourself around. So how do you develop your marketing plans? Can you give us an overall view of that?
All right.
Sorry,
like trying to figure out how to squeeze all this into. There's a very common acronym, AIDA. So that's awareness, interest, desire, action. And it is the sales cycle that every reader goes through. So they need to be aware of your book. They need to be interested in your book. They need to have desire for your book. And then they need to take the action to buy it or, download it or whatever. So you need to have all of those covered. And then you need to figure out where your problem is. So awareness is they just need to know that it exists. And that, again, there's a glut of books. So that is a challenge. Reach is absolutely a challenge. Interest is the reason why book covers look alike. Because they're going to be like, I really want a mafia romance. If you've got an illustrated teddy bear on the cover and it says Mafia Daddy, you are basically, it's an unforced error.
Yeah.
Because they're going to be like, yep, I'm not interested. So that's a problem. Desire is, okay, I've qualified this book. I know that it fits my interests, but it has my attention, but I need it to really, sell me. And that's where desire comes in. That's your book description. That's your, basically your book. When you're writing it, you need to bake that in. It needs to be something that is a hook. For role playing, the hook, weirdly enough, was not only that it had older protagonists, but because they meet in an online game, she thinks he's like 20. He thinks she's 80. It's bonkers. So it is this very specific sustained misunderstanding. And also, once they meet, it becomes like hijinks because she was like, I don't want to fall in love. And he's just like, I don't know what to do with this. And that was able to be succinctly, that was the desire. Action is make it easy as possible for them to buy a book. And whether you choose to do wide or you choose to do Kindle Unlimited or however you choose. Oh, and the other thing, ask for the sales.
Yeah.
So many people don't do that. And it's just like, they're like, I don't want to be, that author. I don't want to be the one that, and there's like, yes, there's a right way and a wrong way. But again, in social media, it is so shocking that people aren't online 24 hours and they will have missed your last request. And there are people that even like you that don't know you have a book out because they haven't signed up for your newsletter. So ask for the sale and have sales links that work. Or if you post about it on social media, put a buy link. Make it easy. But in most cases, an author has a bottleneck somewhere. And trying to address all of them at once is going to be a problem.
Yeah.
It's sort of like you triage, where, like basically if awareness is a problem, get it out there in whatever ways possible. And I won't like get granular, but if interest is a problem because, okay, cover, you need to fix that before you signal boost, because otherwise the signal boost is not going to help. It's that kind of thing. That within those 4 blocks, you need to figure out where the first bottleneck is.
That's great. Thank you. That's it, because it's funny because I think awareness is the one thing that everyone always think, oh, it's just about awareness, but actually there's so much more to it that you kind of there's no point marketing if you've got the wrong cover or you haven't.
I've noticed a lot of new writers too. They're really passionate about their books, as they should be. We should all be passionate, but that sort of then will roll over a little bit onto I want this cover, and it doesn't actually fit in the genre, So that's a real learning curve too, to let that go and go, actually, I have to have this cover because it's like all those covers. You don't want to be different, do you?
There's like having a unique voice is very different than the realities in some ways of marketing, where it's sort of like all the things I talked about with role playing that were so unique aren't necessarily stated in the book description. It was just the book description, and I was lucky, which also should never be discounted. Luck is a huge factor, but I begged to get a Lenny Kaufman cover. And we got one, and I still think it's one of her best, but I'm biased. It is gorgeous, and it is exactly what I wanted. I mean, it was one of the best Asian characters I've ever seen drawn, period. And the characters look exactly the way I wanted them to. And she was very open to like, no, I need him beefed up because he's kind of like a couch. And, it was perfect. So between that confluence of, I got the cover, I got the book description, and it hit the right people. And that's when the awareness grew even beyond what I was trying, because the unique elements were what it was like. You need the marketing elements as like Tinder. You need your unique voice to actually be the fire.
Yeah.
That's true.
Right,
I feel like, and maybe this is just something I want to hear, but I am always hearing authors talk about how they were writing this one other genre, but there was a secret book that they really wanted to write, or not secret, not so secret maybe, but there was this book that was the book they wanted to write, and then they just ended up writing it because of something happening in their lives, and then that book takes off. And I remember Jennifer Armentrout talked about that, the book of hers that took off. KF Breens talked about it. You've talked about it here. Just actually just writing
Rebecca
something
Yaros,
yeah,
classic.
Rebecca Yaros, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So there's a lot of people talking about how, you if you just can distill the thing that means something to you, then yeah. I can see a but forming.
It's not a but, weirdly. I loved role playing so incredibly much.
Yeah.
That all the things I was scared to do for other books because I didn't know I was good enough, I didn't care.
Yeah.
I wanted people to know about this book.
Yeah.
I cold emailed Suzanne Brockman for a quote. I was just like, and like a bunch of other people, and it was a numbers game, but I was like, you know what? All the things I know I should do or maybe shouldn't do, I'm doing because I love this book with a passion that defies reason.
Yeah.
And she was like, can you send it to me? like, okay, I can't promise anything. And she loved it, gave me a quote.
Nice.
Awesome. That's fantastic.
And my editor and I were both like,
look what happened.
But I do think that when you write the book of your heart, even if it's different, even if you do, that's why it's successful, because the confidence is you won't let it go. You have to, like, you will take risks that you wouldn't for anything else.
Yeah.
And that makes the difference.
I like that. That wasn't actually what I was thinking of, but that actually makes a lot of sense. That's awesome. Yeah, very, very true.
A good nugget.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is a great way.
So we're closing in on the end of the interview here, but I want to ask if you've got kind of any last pieces of wisdom for our listeners, anything that you think that people should think about if they're wanting to get started, or anything that you want to tell our listeners.
So many things.
Yeah, I was going to say, given us so many.
I think that, again, community is so important. Really ask yourself, just because it is very easy to get swept up, and this industry can be hard on people. Establish a personal GMC. Again, external and internal. What do you want? And really, why do you want it? Yeah. Because it is very easy to get swept up in I want to make 6 figures or 7 figures, and like by the end of the year, even though that's 3 months away or 2 months or whatever. It is so easy to get caught up in the hype and the hysteria, and then judge yourself when it doesn't seem to be happening, or it seems like, what am I doing wrong? Or am I not cut out for this? Or am I a terrible writer or whatever? And it's sort of like you have to slow down and ask yourself, okay, do I want to work? Like, do I want to publish a book every 2 weeks? Do I want to do, because success doesn't have to look the same. And that's not like, get used to having $100 a year and be happy. But really look at, what am I willing to do? What do I want to do? And why do I want this? Because I think that the answer to what people want from their publishing career is different than what they wind up chasing. And that's what tends to grind them down.
Yeah. Knowing
awesome.
that is, that's awesome. I like that. Like knowing that it's quite often for writers, isn't it, about the writing, like for most writers, and then we start chasing the money, because that's what everyone, a lot of the stuff that gets talked about around the traps is about the money. And then,
well, I think similar to kind of like writing the book of your heart, and that's what breaks you out. I think sort of slowing down and, giving yourself the time. And it's like, that's not to knock fast writers. I know and love a lot of them. But really looking at, okay, what do I need? And that giving yourself that space and taking some of the pressure off will get you to the book that actually gets you where you want to go.
Yeah. Because I've definitely been there, trying to write a book fast and to market and to be all the things it's supposed to be, and then not feeling satisfied with the end result and wishing I'd just spent a bit more time with it. So I love that. That's awesome. Thank you so much, Cathy. It's been a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank
Really
you.
cool. Fantastic. Now you're an author coach, and you have courses as well, or can you tell us a little bit about that? Where can people go to find you?
I have courses and I am a writing coach. My website is rockyourwriting.com. So I do one-on-one coaching, and I currently have my plot course up, and I will be having a time management course up probably by January at the latest.
Fantastic.
And then the marketing course. So yeah, that's
all of those things.
Awesome. All of those things.
Get to those places. And Shah, where can we be found?
We can be found at spygirlspodcast.com. We've changed to a new theme, so come along to our website and tell us what you think about it, and only tell me good things. How's that?
So really don't tell us what you think. Only good things.
No, it's the end of the year. We're all tired. Please be nice. And we're 24 people off 3,000 on YouTube. And I'm not going to beg.
Well done, Shah.
But I'm just saying that it would make
I'm begging.
this woman.
I'm begging
She's
all of
asking.
you listening.
She's asking what she wants.
I just want to say it's very happy.
It's not just about her, it's us, because we have to listen to her.
Exactly. So really, you're serving
love us.
Many
get in there.
Many things here. So that's at YouTube at Spy Girls Podcast. So we'd love it if you would subscribe there. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you, Cathy, for joining us. It's been fantastic.
Thank you, Cathy.
And thank you to all of our listeners for being with us again for another episode of the Spy Girls Podcast. We'll be back again next week. But for now, farewell.
Well,
bye.
Bye.